Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. As we've seen with previous installments, Stan Lee's interpretations of classic DC icons take some very different appearances on. Today, we look at possibly the most drastic one yet, though it's of a character that was created by Fawcett, not DC, and whose original name was kind of usurped by Marvel when it became legally opportunistic. Anyway, I'm taking issue with just imagine Stan Lee creating Shazam. Let's see if this comic makes us want to turn the page or turn our heads. Joining Stan on this book are Gary Frank, Sandra Hope, and Chris Chukri. The cover features lightning striking dangerously close to some palm trees, possibly because of the demonic-looking giant, or maybe the blonde in the slightly torn evening dress with the Felicia Hardy-approved plunging neckline. Neither of them look particularly thrilled either. They were probably on their way to a black tie affair, but were denied entry because one of them forgot their tie. Also pants. We begin in a dark room, where imps and less than Disney-like sort of fairy creatures surround a scantily clad woman. Even though that term is kind of understating things. She looks as if a nudist from the old He-Man cartoon tried her laziest to wear clothes for the first time. The narration tries to put a kind of tongue-in-cheek spin on this. Don't let her skimpy attire fool you. This lady possesses more garments than Armani. In fact, she doesn't have to buy them. Just a few magic words and she can have whatever she wants. Except for right now. She doesn't need any magic words, because what she wants is to get hypothermia. This is Morgana Le Fay, and she's dropping a lizard into a cauldron as part of her diabolical plan to destroy Merlin. Yes, that Merlin. The next day finds the wizard alerted by his glowing staff of his old student's approach, her tiny lizard now changed into a giant beast. I'm going to call him Snuggles, because he's certainly going to be around for a while. She sicks the creature on him, thinking him too old and weak, but he ends the creature quite handily. Snuggles! No! Morgana tries a fake-out, claiming that the beast was controlling her mind, but Merlin's having none of it. He's aware he only has a few centuries left before he kicks the bucket, so magically imprisons Morgana inside a tree, but knows that eventually the spell will fade and she'll break out. Here's a rare sight in a Stan Lee comic. 2 panels without any dialogue or narration. It's actually a good choice because it helps allow the situation and character expressions to speak for themselves. Within 2 panels, he decides to create a supernatural creature, then puts it to sleep off panel for being too dangerous to walk amongst mankind. Then leaves the castle because he's a sorcerer supreme that's headed up to here with constant battle. This panel kind of yada-yadas the creation of a new magical champion that's supposed to save mankind. I mean, was he created in between word bubbles there? Is he sautéing in that pool of lemon-lime Kool-Aid or something? We jump to present-day India, where Interpol agents Robert Rogers and Carla Noral are looking for a terrorist leader called Gunga Khan. They're not having much luck, but probably because they can't just look to the panels at the side where he's testing his shrink ray, which is meant to operate alongside a satellite they have in orbit, with the intention of shrinking everyone in North America to insect size and conquer the continent. Yep. 5 pages in and our villain has a shrink ray, people. I'm half expecting the animated versions of G.I. Joe to show up. Not that I would be opposed to a spontaneous appearance by Lady J. The agents take notice of a street performer wowing the crowd and explaining, in English, again we're in India, how mind and body in perfect harmony can accomplish the impossible, like emitting green mist from your fingers, making a carpet float, creating fire, and turning snakes into rope. Those are all impressive feats, except for the mist out of his fingers. That's actually a very serious medical condition, meaning he has not been taking those medications prescribed by his doctor. As the two take their leave, Carla senses something up with Rob, and he says he's kind of bugged by the fact that his female partner is a black belt, while he's a nerdy investigator that, under different circumstances, gets sand kicked in his face. Yeah, the whole damaged macho image thing feels very dated and is kind of saved by Rob's inner monologue, stating that he's secretly in love with Carla. Kind of saved. Your mileage may vary. They hear a ruckus that Nerd Boy is fine with avoiding. Some disguised goons are beating the magician for the secrets to his tricks, but he's keeping quiet. He's old enough that death doesn't scare him, and they'll get nothing about his magic. He takes the abuse like a boss until Carla comes in with a flying kick that I think could only be possible if she knew how to fly. But hey, it does look cool. Rob reaches for his gun only to get kabonged in the face with the butt of a thrown knife. A little humiliating, sure, but any further or closer, and it would have been the sharp end, so lucky him. After Carla blinds another thug with his own hood, while showing an hilariously disapproving face, Rob struggles off panel to unholster his gun, then fires, scaring off the aggressors. Carla runs to find a doctor for the old man while Rob stays with him. The magician tells the agent that magic is real and can't die with him, and says the nerd must remember Shazam, so he's not lost forever. Then he passes away. But he wasn't afraid to die while he was in the fight. Or did it take a few more hits to the head with a club to make him remember, oh yeah, there's that magical entity I need to carry on after I die in order to save the world from my arch-nemesis? I'm still trying to figure out why he didn't use some of his magic to either scare or fight off these goons himself instead of taking a beating. In Los Angeles, Reverend Dark is holding another gathering of followers in his Church of Eternal Empowerment when he's psychically summoned elsewhere. He speaks with Morgana, who's almost figured out what clothes are, who looks very different from the Morgana we saw in the previous installment, so either the artists weren't really clued in as to how she'd look in modern day, or by sheer coincidence the church has two Morganas. Yeah, sure, let's go with that. Anyway, she says the magic has been transferred to someone new, a novice, but one Dark fears may learn.
That's right, he can be taught. What would you wish of me?
Back in India, Rob witnesses the old man's flesh and bones dissolve away in green mist, gone completely when the doctor arrives. He lets Carla believe her theory that the body was taken for a quick burial, since she's not likely to believe he just got super biodegradable. Later, Rob is dressed in a tux, waiting for Carla to get ready so they can grab some grub, when the same goons barge into his hotel room, wanting to know what the old man told him. She hears the ruckus and finds Rob at their mercy, fighting one off while snarking, "If this is how you greet tourists in this hotel, you'd better get your act together, or next time we go to the Holiday Inn." Beat up old man, threatened us with deadly weapons, and made us late for dinner. 1 star, would not get attacked by again. One goon manages to get the drop on Carla, knocking her out with chloroform, and they decide to take her. For some reason, they know she's not the one that talked to the old dude when he croaked, but anyway, since Rob isn't telling them what they want to hear, he gets tied up and tossed into the nearby river. He wouldn't mind death so much if it had been in the line of duty, but this end seems rather meaningless, never seeing his secret agent crush again, all over the word Shazam. Lightning strikes the water, and soon after, the red monster from the cover bursts out of the water, shouting the name again. Expositing his feelings of rage, he stops to wonder how he got free, finally noticing the change that's come over him. He says the name again and reverts to human form. After realizing what the metamorphic password does, he remembers he's got a partner in danger. I know it seems nitpicky, and I'm already ignoring the fact that he said the word while underwater when, you'd think he'd try to conserve his oxygen a little, but he should have transformed back to human after he said it coming out of the water. I would have given it the benefit of the doubt if there was some added caveat, like the New 52 Shazam comic version needing it to be said in a certain emotional state, but they haven't established that, so nitpick I must. Agent Noral is taken to see Gunga Khan, who, we can see, is a lot more pale than the natives, and probably has a British accent just by convention. His pseudonym was intended to instill fear in his victims, but I think he really wanted to surprise people when they found out he's just a dude that dresses like a mid-tier Indiana Jones villain. Kanzi decides to demonstrate his shrink ray for Carla, reducing the size of a man that had intended to betray him, then picking him up and tossing him aside. His captive asks what he plans to do with such a satanic device, which I just don't see what's inherently satanic about a shrink ray, but there it is. And Khan says he'll exterminate all opposition, starting with the United States, and decides to let the woman live long enough to see his success. Because otherwise she can't interfere with his plans like she's no doubt going to. What kind of supervillain would he be if he just killed her right now?
No, I'm going to leave them alone and not actually witness them dying. I'm just going to assume it all went to plan. What?
Meanwhile, Rob, the investigator, has no idea where to look for his partner. Maybe there weren't enough clues in his hotel room, but did it never occur to him to call for backup? He figures he could cover more ground if he were bigger and stronger, and says Shazam, again changing to his monstrous form. He realizes that it's beginning to get a little more difficult to think straight as a truck barrels towards him.
So little time to get out of the way. No.
Fortunately for that driver's insurance rates, he sprouts wings to fly over on instinct, much to his own amazement. After a bit of nausea, he lands, yelling at the crowd for staring at him like a freak, and in the process says the beast's name again to change back into human, conveniently after any potential witnesses have already run away. Weakened, he stumbles into an alley where he, conveniently again, stumbles upon two of Gunga Khan's loyal henchmen bragging about how the Shazam monster will be easily destroyed by their boss because he captured an Interpol agent, and they'd rather die than give up his location. It's lucky the Interpol insisted I learn their language. I guess they're speaking their native language, despite the lack of any kind of brackets to indicate that an American comic book is translating a foreign language. I gotta say, it is just a little bit confusing. But then again, Robbie Boy just happened to accidentally sneak up on the exact kind of goons he needs to, so other things to focus on, I suppose. And hey, after what could only be maybe a minute and a half, the Shazam name has already gotten traction. There are companies who would kill for that kind of marketing. Anyway, he changes again and takes them up in the sky, and creating enough doubt in them and their leader's effectiveness that they give up his location in a fortified cave. He arrives there, finding an obstinate metal door he thinks he can punch through, but goes ahead and uses a large rock. Animated Killer Croc would be proud. One of Khan's scientists is telling him everything is go for Operation Destroy America. I'm sorry. I can't help it. It's just so hilariously on the nose. I know I've complained about the lack of subtlety in previous stories with more modern writers, but at least this one has some real entertainment value. Anyway, Shazam walks in, goon in each arm, demanding the girl. Khan plays along until he can get his twin-barreled spear gun? But it shoots metal arrowheads? I don't know. They don't do much until Khan adds some voltage, which is enough to make the demonic creature more docile, so much so that the terrorist thinks that shocking him bad enough makes him a slave, trusted enough to stand guard over Carla. This somehow works, as the agent had just picked the lock to her cell when Shazam squeezes it shut and mutters that the girl is his enemy. And this is significantly less whimsical. I've gotten a nasty electrical shock or two in my time, but it never brainwashed me. Not that I remember, anyway. One of Khan's goons approaches Noral's cell, somehow not seeing Shazam, and says that he finds her so attractive he'll ask his boss to let him have her as a reward of loyalty, after he's destroyed the U.S. Apparently it's patriotism that snaps Shazam out of his fugue state, and on the next page he's already freed Carla, heading for the shrink ray and taking out more cannon fodder along the way. Everything is go for shrinking the U.S., but Khan wants to savor his moment of triumph a bit longer. His scientist hangs a lampshade on this cliché, saying he shouldn't do that as Carla and Shazam close in. So Khan pushes the button. Oh no, he's launched the shrinking ray missile! Alright, the descriptive terms have been kind of wonky as relating to the shrink ray device. Earlier it sounded like Khan was going to teleport the machine to his satellite and it would fire from space, but now it looks like it's going to fire a missile at the satellite, which will redirect it to the United States. But it's been referred to as like being energy-based as a projectile, so why are they saying missile when it's energy-based? And just... Shazam is reminded what's at stake, because I guess he forgot in the last 5 minutes, and more goons arrive for Color to fight. So the Crimson Creature takes flight, and I guess fast enough to not only escape Earth's gravity, but also outrun the energy missile thing to destroy the satellite in the nick of time. Wow, this is just a lot to ask of the willing suspension of disbelief, people. Sadly, we don't get to see Carla fight off the dozen or so henchmen it took to apprehend her again, but before they can kill her, her wingman returns, feeling like he should know her. When the shrink ray is turned on them, Shazam lifts the weapon at its base, turning the blast back on Khan and his men. And they better be polite and not look upward as they run between her feet. Of course, you could always step on them. They can't be taken in for trial, but they'll be hunted by bugs for the rest of their lives, so hey, trade-off. Carla asks if her new buddy has a name, and when he responds, he reverts back to Rob Rogers, with kind of a long story to tell. Later, after wrecking the machine, they're on a train, after Nerdboy explains what happened to him. They decide it's best to keep Shazam a secret, even from Interpol, and Carla pulls the drapes to explain, wink wink, why the Red Brute may be the best thing to ever happen to her. Now, there's something to unpack. She shows zero interest in the guy for 38 pages of story, but now that they've got this little secret all to themselves, she's jonesing for nerdy investigators that are kind of terrible at investigating. I mean, what do I need to do? Paint myself red and destroy doomsday devices? Because a certain judge won't let me do one of those things. The story ends in the shadows of Dark's church, where Morgana says his master plan is almost ready, but the Reverend is concerned about a delay caused by a new player. All spooky and ominous-like. Woo! And wow, I do not know how to describe Morgana's expression here. It's like she's pretending to be surprised by something she already knew, but isn't doing it very well. On the Street takes place in New Delhi, where the artists nicely show off how densely populated the city is. Anyway, Ambassador Batson is looking for a kid named Billy, hiding under his bed from the bad people everywhere. The man recalls meeting the boy's parents, Mary and Fred, when they joined the Peace Corps, and Billy was just a baby. He grew up in India while his parents absorbed the culture and taught medical and agricultural techniques. And I like this scene here where an Indian boy is telling Billy about the holy nature of the moly plant. It's a little cheesy, but yeah, enjoyably so. I actually did a little research to see if there was a real-life moly flora, and if it was indeed native to India. But what I found out was moly was the name of an herb in Greek mythology, and I got some articles using puns relating to invasive moles in gardens. Unfortunately, affectionate references and technological aid only go so far. Famine and war encroached, and we see the parents in bed, Mary weakly encouraging her son to continue helping people as they pass away. This panel here is small, but the kid's expression makes it just so intense. It's almost a little unsettling. Billy took off after that, making it hard for the ambassador to find him, and in the process saw a whole lot of horrible stuff, including his friend the Fakir beaten while nobody helped. But the ambassador says people did come to the magician's aid, and wants to tell the child about heroes, super and otherwise. I think it stands to reason that Billy witnessed the attack, but ran away either to get help or because he was scared. Either way, he left shortly before Carol's flying kick turned the tides. That's why you stay till the end of the show, people. The ambassador takes the lad to Khan's lair, explaining how Shazam put a stop to his evil plans. Standard Peace Corps procedure, I'm sure. He says Billy can either go live with relatives in the US or stay in India with the Corps, which is kinda head-scratching. You would think that, barring some arrangement by his parents, he'd go to his next of kin, but I guess story's got a story. Batson gives this very Stan Lee monologue about heroes being all around us, in jungles and cities, in fire trucks or police cars. It only gets more Stan Lee when he says, "Remember, you don't have to have great power to accept great responsibility." Don't look at me. The next day, Billy meets up with his pal Zubeen, who hasn't had a bite in 2 days. because a warlord raided his family's farm. I know, it's not a great punchline. Figuring that if a giant red magic monster can make a difference, so can two small children, Billy takes his rational-thinking friend to the warlord's camp, because Zubin just happens to know where it is. They get spotted with one old man choosing to shoo them away instead of letting his buddy gut them with his knife. The kids make a dash for it and find a herd of elephants. Conveniently, they're also carrying baskets full of the food that was stolen from the boys' farm. They manage to get the pachyderms to stampede out of the camp and make their way back into town. The comic doesn't actually show them make it into town with no further destruction of property or what have you, but I'm sure it all went okay. You know elephants, they stop on a dime. Another day later, Ambassador Batson commends the kids for their heroic deeds, lauded by the public, and then decides to make them honorary captains in the Peace Corps. He salutes them, saying that from now on he'll address Zubin as Captain Novotny and Billy as Captain Marvel. Yes, that's his last name because Stan was such a cheeky so-and-so. After that, we get some early sketches of the Shazam creature, a preview for the next chapter, and the back cover, which has a monster movie vibe going for it. And that was Stan Lee's Shazam. There were some peculiarities in the dialogue, like the awkward use of the term female and repeat use of insects in relation to how the shrink ray trunk people, and it lent itself to a few conveniences. But while not spectacular, it was at least very fun to read. For the most part, I like Gary Frank's art, but there are times where it can be so detailed his expressions can look just more disturbing than probably was intended. And Carla's neckline seemed gratuitously plunged at times, and Morgana obviously had her beat out in that regard. For my taste, this didn't seem to be particularly appealing, as it was over the top to the point of being ludicrous in an attempt to look sexy-ish. But otherwise, I didn't have any problem with the art. I felt the romance was kinda tacked on because the agents just happened to be the leads, but at least Carla wasn't totally useless. She was a pretty effective fighter, showing what her black belt level skills can do, which is more than can be said for Robert's investigative skills. It would have been nice to see him actually analyze the scene of the abduction, but we just see him wonder how he's gonna find her. Shazam working for the bad guy because of a tasering seemed a little pointless, but could have been better founded with a little bit more explanation and exploration of the mental change that happens along with the physical one. There was a bit more telling than showing for my tastes, but there was a lot of humor in it that made it worthwhile. The short story was a nice nod to Billy Batson, though one couldn't be blamed for thinking it awfully reminiscent of the old Johnny Quest cartoon. It's kind of like if they mashed the Hulk with Etrigan and threw in some Arthurian lore for good measure. And it's worth the read if you're okay with some older narrative styles. I'll admit it's pretty tenuous for me to review this comic for a Halloween episode, mostly since this wasn't even the most scary-looking Shazam Gary Frank has ever had to draw. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.